Hey everyone, we'll give people a few minutes to trickle in before we get started. Welcome in. In the meantime, Aleesha, do you want to share in the chat a quick icebreaker before we get started?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm going to drop in the chat, but feel free to share where you're from and what's your dream job in the chat.
Hey, should we get started? If we have quorum. Aleesha, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you all for joining today. It's great to see such a big audience. We're excited to dive into such an important topic, which is strategies for landing your dream job and advancing your career. So this is a topic that is really super near and dear to our hearts because it's been a tough job market for so many, myself included. So whether you're just starting out in your career, you're pivoting, maybe you're recently laid off, we hope you can get some valuable insights today. Before we get into intros, we'll have Q&A at the end, but we want this to be interactive. So Aleesha has teed up some exercises for the group, but if you have additional questions, drop them in the chat because we will be monitoring it. Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Andrew Sugar. I graduated from University of Michigan. I now work there as an adjunct career coach and professor where I coach MBAs and non-MBAs on their career strategy. And I also have my own coaching practice here on Leland. Bring over 12 years of go-to-market experience across B2B tech and SaaS, and my journey spans startups, consulting, and direct sales roles at Google and at Yelp as well. And not pictured is my wife and I have a 3-month-old boy named Ethan who keeps us very busy at home. So if you hear some screams, that's who it's from. Aleesha?
Thanks. Hi everyone. I'm Aleesha. I'm an integral leadership coach. And what that means is I work with my clients at the level of the root cause. So instead of just being focused on the what and how of career and leadership, we go deep on the who, and it's through that lens we make progress together. So while taking steps to resolve a current situation like a job search, which is our topic today, I also support my clients to connect more fully to their overall purpose and trajectory. Prior to starting my coaching certification program and journey, I led marketing teams and have over 15 years of experience working for brands such as LinkedIn, as you can see, Nike, Disney, as well as a couple of startups. And I'm also a proud NYU Stern alumni, wife, dog mom, yogi, hummus lover, big foodie here, and a newfound minimalist after a 2-year road trip. Honored to be here with all of you.
Awesome. So today we'll be breaking down the career search into really 2 main parts. The first part, crafting your story, that's going to be led by Aleesha. She will guide you on how to piece together an effective, personalized story. Think of it as like your own elevator pitch And then you'll do some exercises together to help answer these 4 questions, which we think are fundamental to understanding your career goals and what you're really interested in. And then my section, which is translating your story into job search success, is more about the actionable steps that have helped me, dozens of my clients, build a network, stand out in your job search, and really land more interviews and more jobs. So that's a basic structure today. So Aleesha, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, thanks. All right. So before we jump in, I suggest everyone opens up like either a Google Doc or grabs like a notebook or piece of paper so you can start to like capture your thoughts as we go through the next few slides. As Andrew said, it's going to be more of like a mini workshop for your story. And so I'll guide you through some key questions and share examples along the way. And we'll be pausing and giving a couple more minutes of reflection. So grab that sheet of paper, open up that Google Doc. And if you feel free as you're like reflecting, feel free to share some examples in the Zoom chat as well to support the community here. All right, so the first question, if you think about when networking and interviewing, we're often asked, tell me about yourself. And part of what they want to know is what motivates and drives you, what's important to you. And so the first question I want to start with is asking, and I want to encourage all of you to ask is, what do I like truly, genuinely want? So most often we're so caught up with what others want us to be doing, whether that's family, friends, or teachers, that we often forget or don't prioritize taking a step back and asking ourselves that question. So asking all of you to start thinking about that question, not just from like practically from the mind, but also like listening to your heart and body. And so if we go to the next slide, I actually have a couple of prompts for us, and then we'll pause for reflection. So double clicking into that question, like more big picture, starting to think about what is my North Star? So you can think about this as your purpose or like your career vision or like your why. So to give you an example, mine is to help people live more fully. And I also want to note like this can evolve over time. And so as you start to think about what is yours, like just take a first pass at what it might be for you right now. And it's something that you will continue to noodle on. The second piece is more near term, and it's about identifying your list of non-negotiables. So if you think about your upcoming job search or this next dream job that you want to get, what's like really important to you that's like critical as part of your search? This is important because it narrows down what you're focusing on, what roles you want to look for, but also how you craft that story. Because as we know, there's just like an unending amount of jobs out there. So for example, the last time I went through a job search, I was only looking at remote friendly roles that were impact or mission driven. Those were like my 2 non-negotiables. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to encourage each of you to take your piece of paper, go into that Google Doc and start to reflect on, okay, what's my high level purpose, North Star career vision? And then also, what are my 3 to 5 non-negotiables? And we'll give everyone about a minute or two, and I'll have my timer going on. So feel free to start like workshopping this for yourself.
And I'll play the ocean jams to match the background.
Love that. And if you feel comfortable sharing, I welcome examples of what you all are thinking through to be dropped into the chat. All right, we'll give everyone another 30 seconds or so before we move on. All right, before we move on, does anyone want to drop into the chat maybe their starting point for the North Star or purpose or any non-negotiables if you're thinking about your job search? I know some of you shared you're looking for roles in finance or product manager or software engineer. So as you think about those industries, what are some of those non-negotiables coming up for you? All right. So I think we can move to the next question. So the next key ingredient that recruiters and hiring managers want to hear in your story is what makes you unique, like what makes you you, what makes you stand out versus other candidates. And this is especially important in a competitive job market like it is today. So I know this is probably like one of the most daunting pieces of like, how do I pull this together? How can I verbalize this and figure this out for my story? But before we break it down, I want to assure you that each of you are unique and beautiful and have like a unique story to tell. Just like this hummingbird, which is one of my favorite birds. And it's in your control. So it's in our control to bring this to life when talking to recruiters and hiring managers so that they can see that unique magic in you. All right, so how do we do that? So if you go to the next slide, we're going to break it down. And really, the starting place is starting to list out what are your top three or your core values, passions, and skills. And I'll walk through each of them. So if you think of your values, you can think of these as your guiding principles. So how do you live your day to day? What do you strive for? For example, mine are service, freedom, and inner harmony. And so these values shape my decision making. They shape how I spend my time. When I went through a job search, I asked questions that pressure tested whether this company or the team or the manager aligns with these values of mine. They also give you signals of how you feel. So I want you to start noodling on like what are your core values. Just similar to your North Star, I think aligning on what your core values are sometimes takes deep reflection. And so if it's not something that immediately comes up, that's okay. Just want you to start capturing them, and you can always come back to them and refine them and like test them out. The one thing I'll say here is like dig deep into trying to uncover like what's truly your values versus those you might have inherited from either family or just culturally or society like expectations. All right, so then the passions. So you can think of these as what you enjoy doing, your hobbies, how you spend your free time. So as I said in my intro, I'm a huge foodie, and one of my passions is food. And I especially love how food brings people together to heal, bond, and share. And I can spend hours talking about, reading about, and eating food. So what are your passions? And capture like the top three here. And then lastly, your top three skills. So if you think about, your last performance review, or maybe what people come to you in school and ask you for help with, or at work, these tend to be like your top three skills or your strengths. And so, for example, my key skills in the workplace tended to be around primary research, critical thinking, stakeholder management. So start to think about like, what are your three key skills? And before I sort of clarify and sort of pull this all together, I'm going to pause again and give you all 2 minutes to really identify and come up with your list. So that's three values, three passions, and three skills. I give everyone another 30 seconds, and if anyone wants to share an example of any of them, feel free to share that in the chat. It's always helpful to see what others are thinking and working through to give inspiration to each other. Thanks, Amit. All right, so how this all comes together. So now that you have your list, or at least working list, what I want you to start doing as a next step is identifying like how do they start to overlap? So what's like common in the list, or like where's like the common thread that you can connect the dots between these three? And also starting to think about what are key pivotal personal experiences or work projects that bring these to life. So examples that you can, or like anecdotes that are so unique to you that can start to bring these to life as part of your story, as part of that elevator pitch. So for example, one of the points that I bring up is, as a first generation immigrant, I moved away from home at the age of 12 in pursuit of a better education. And, while leaving my parents and sister was extremely difficult, this experience truly shaped me. And not only did I grow up really fast and fend for myself, but I also learned how to live with others from different backgrounds, and did that at a very early age. And so that not only taught me how to forge strong relationships that nurtured my empathetic side, and also helped me become more adaptable and independent. And, earlier I mentioned how stakeholder management is one of my skills. I mentioned how service is one of my values, and how what I love about food is like connecting and bringing people together. And so it's all starts to connect, and it's, pulling it together and like through a personal experience. And of course, I said it in a lot of words here, but that's a starting point. That's just an example I wanted to share. And so as you think about the list that you have, start to see like what's common, or like what are some like personal experiences or work projects that start to bring these to life, because stories is what people will remember. Stories will help differentiate you from other candidates, versus just sort of listing out your skills. So I will pause again and give you all a minute to get these creative juices flowing, and fully recognize this is going to take you much longer than just the minute we're giving you, but this is just a starting phase. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next question. But I know this recording will be available after this session for those of you who want to refer back to it as well, because I know some of this takes more time to work through. All right, so we discussed, the high level, like what do you want? Also, we discussed then thinking about like what makes you different. And so we've really focused on you. Now this next part is like the alignment or intersection between the companies and the roles. And so the next key ingredient really of the story, and that recruiters and hiring managers want to know, is like, why are you interested in their company or their team or in this role? Like, what makes you best suited for that, to them and why you even having this interview or conversation with them. So this part of the story typically requires research on the company and role. It's more tailored. So the other sections, you can kind of have back pocket and are like foundational to your story. And then this is how you kind of connect it to the specific company or role that you're looking to apply to or that you're interviewing for. So moving to the next slide, things that you would want to, research about and sort of do your homework on is, what's the company strategy, its vision, mission, priorities, the culture, like its values, its practices, and then going into the role specifics as well. I think the two things that I want you to take away here is like, when you're thinking through sort of that alignment between you and the company and role, it's really tuning into that your full self. So it's not just assessing the company and all role from like, oh, this sounds good on paper, but when you're actually reading the job description or you're learning about the company and its mission and what it does, like, how does that make you feel? Is that something like you're excited to work on? Do you want to be really part of that company? Or like when you read it, you're just like, oh, this sounds exhausting. Like those are signals that your body is giving you, and that is important to listen to because it shows up in your story as well. It shows up in how you connect and show up, like connect your story to like why you're interested in this company. And once you've started to find that alignment, it's connecting the values or your skills and passions to the company here. So really observe, like even when you're in an interview, right? Like the hiring managers like talking about the role, like just listen to yourself or like observe at the end of it. Like, how did that actually feel? Like we often don't realize like interviewing is two ways. So just want to encourage you all to sort of keep that in mind. And to sort of bring this to life, the one example of like how I've like leaned on my values. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but my values, as I said, one of them is like freedom. And so one thing that when I was looking for my last job, I was very conscious about understanding like what are the company values, how much autonomy do I get as a leader? And as we know, like startups are always looking for people to come in, just as operators who can like get the job done without much hand holding, without much oversight, because they just don't have that level of management. And so I found really good fit and alignment between my values, how I like to operate, and what the company was looking for. And so that's how you might start to connect the dots and how you might start to connect it in your story as well. Given this part is like super custom to like the role or the company, like we won't pause here for reflections, but it's a critical step to tailoring your story to each setting before you go into that interview or coffee chat or networking session. And so the last section before I'll hand off to Andrew is really how do you deliver the story effectively? So once you have like the key components, how do you bring it all together so that it really lands and it feels like relevant and effective? So moving on to the next slide, just a couple quick do's and don'ts. The reason I started to like encourage you all to think of like just the top 3 skills or the top 3 passions or like the one sort of purpose statement is like you want your story to be short and punchy, like within 2 minutes. And in certain situations, it's going to have to even be like 30 seconds to a minute long. And so you want to just say enough to pique curiosity, but you don't want to share too many details. You don't want to repeat your resume. You also want to personalize your story. So that's where the personal stories come, and you want to make it memorable and relatable and tailor it to each situation. And practice. Like I know it sounds so obvious, but not a lot of people like practice and practice out loud. So like share with your friends or talk to yourself in the mirror, whatever makes you feel comfortable, but do the practice because that really helps you hear the story yourself and get really comfortable with it so you can show up authentically. And then the last thing I want to call out here is like paying attention to more than just the words, right? So what is your body actually saying? The non-verbal communication, like your posture, your hand movements, your eye contact, your tone of voice. There's so much that we communicate non-verbally. And so it's actually paying attention to that. So if it's possible, even recording yourself with the camera on and actually seeing and observing all of the communication so that that helps you build more confidence and connection with whoever that you're sharing your story with. So before we wrap up this section, I'm going to actually invite Andrew to share his story as an example for us, which ties all of the pieces together and gives you all like a glimpse into how it comes together.
Sure, no pressure. But I'm
Thanks,
happy to.
Andrew.
So I'm actually going to share an example of it's like a 75-second or so elevator pitch that I used recently when I was interviewing for a leadership position at Intuit. So basically, the time to use this would be interviewers asking you to walk through your resume, and you do so, but you try to combine it with some of the elements that Aleesha was talking about, your connection to the role, connection to the company, the values of the company, and how it overlaps with your skills and interests. So here it goes. I'm a seasoned BD professional with a decade of experience in sales and partnerships within B2B tech and SaaS sectors. But my journey in business began much earlier. As a 10-year-old, I spent weekends helping customers in my grandpa's hat store, actually, which gave me kind of an early exposure to entrepreneurship and ignited a passion that's been there my entire career. So, I've worked at Google. I've led partnerships with some high growth tech companies. I had my MBA. I think from a skill standpoint, I think I'm very comfortable building revenue generating partnerships that help startups scale. But coming from a family of small business owners, I'm really committed to this idea of making entrepreneurship more accessible. So this combined with, again, some of the expertise around building strategic partnerships, launching businesses of my own as well, I think positions me really well for this role to grow the small business startup division at Intuit. So, just as I supported my grandpa's business years ago, I'm eager to contribute to the mission of making the process of starting and running a business more accessible to everyone. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Aleesha, but
No, I think that's
okay.
great. That ties it in so well. Just to kind of highlight some of the things is how Andrew connected his personal experiences, made it personal. Like the note on like how you worked at your grandpa's like hat store. Like that's something I will remember, and like connecting it back to the role and then the company mission, and then interweaving like your skills like truly makes it so unique and differentiated and helps like the story really stand out and resonate with whether it's the recruiter or the hiring manager. So thank you for sharing, Andrew. Hopefully that was helpful for you all to hear a story example. And it obviously takes work, and Andrew has worked on this and like synthesized and edited down. So no, it's not something that comes easily. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So all right, well, I will hand it off to Andrew for the next section. Thanks all.
Thank you. And so before we jumped into this section, which is more of some of the specific steps you can take along your job search, I'm just curious, maybe drop it in the chat. What are some of the challenges that people are facing in your job search? Whether it's networking, lack of networking, or, interview challenges, or maybe lack of, industry knowledge if you're trying to get into a new industry. I'm curious, like some of the issues that people are facing. And I'll try to, tailor my presentation to address some of them and more in the following section. Interview challenges, case interviews. Case interviews are tough. It's all about reps. New grad not getting interviews. Nobody responds to emails. Okay, so kind of a combination of I guess preparing for the interviews, but also, lack of getting there as well. Finding jobs that reflect my passion. Cool. These are great, everyone. Thank you very much. I'll try to address them more as we move on here. But really the first question to address is really how do you build that network? So I really start with a list. So again, start with a list of companies, segment them by interest level. I use tiers, but you can use whatever you like. Try to keep a spreadsheet going and keep track of everything to stay organized. The point here, again, not just target big name companies, but think about what makes a dream company for you, right? Go back to Aleesha's section on the non-negotiables, target companies that fit your values. and aim for like 15 to 20 companies at least to give you the most opportunity to break through. Then you'll want to identify key contacts and start to build relationships with people, in your target companies. I think the one thing I see a lot from my clients and students, especially, is they go out and just target people that they know, like, i.e., their friends. But you really want to try to target people that are closer to the hiring team or the role that you want. They can share more about the day to day to see if it's actually interesting to you, but also they're closer to the hiring process, so they're more influential. So, if you do like talk to friends first that are at a company like that you want to work for, like Google, for example, like go a layer deeper, ask for a connection to someone closer to the hiring team. That's what I would recommend. Number two is start early. Uh, you're probably going to have conversations where people do refer you right away, and that's awesome. But others may not be as willing, and it could be months before you make specific asks. Maybe like you're at a dream company and they're not hiring right now, right? Very common challenge in today's job market. So use LinkedIn to find contacts, ideally someone with some common ground, shared connections, university alumni, but ideally someone closer to that hiring team. Again, just increases your chances of getting a response, which I know is some of the challenges a few of you mentioned. Again, leverage that story in your conversations because people love when you're intentional about the roles that you want so they can actually help you. If they don't know what you actually want and use networking calls, they can't help you. And I think this is a big one, the networking goal. So one thing I notice is that it's really a numbers game. And some people just send like one or two networking emails a week. They don't get a response and they get discouraged. Think of it more of like a marketing funnel where if you send 150 messages, that might be 30 conversations, a 20% response rate, which would be 5 or 10 interviews max, probably closer to 5, and then maybe one offer in today's job market, maybe 2. So again, that's just that one offer, but starting from 150 messages. So again, I want to really stress the more people you outreach, the better your odds of breaking through. And then follow up. I think nurture that relationship over time. If you're on a call and you're having a great conversation, ask for the referral. Oftentimes if you do your research, you come in, you ask good questions, you come in with a positive attitude. Sometimes the employee will offer to refer you without even having to ask, but you have to it's more like art and science there. And follow up. Like if you reach out to someone cold, if they don't respond, follow up in a week. If you've had a discussion that didn't lead to a referral, follow up in a quarter. If they're local, take them out to coffee, share that interesting article, or just generally check in to see how they're doing. And in terms of like a pro tip here, like to make outreach as efficiently as possible, I love templates. So I have basically 3 to 4 templates always ready to go, and I just tailor them according to the person. So I'll share a couple examples here with you. Like these aren't perfect grammar or anything, just examples that have worked for me. So the first template on the left is definitely shorter, more casual, perfect for someone just non-hiring manager at your target company. Because from my experience, simpler, it leads to more responses, a higher response rate if it's a simpler, shorter message. The second template is still concise, but I think it's more detailed and it's designed for a hiring manager or someone who's more senior so they can at least get an idea of like what you bring to the table. So again, different strokes here, but I think you can always customize your message to make them more personal. The goal, what I want to kind of convey is don't waste too much time on personalization. Like see above low response rates in general. The goal should be increase outreach here so you can get as many responses, conversations, like build that network, and then hopefully it leads to more interviews. And any questions on building your network, feel free to blurt out anything. It's a small group here, or drop it in the chat. Okay, I'll move on. So next is really this differentiation idea. How do you actually stand out in your job search if everyone is kind of gunning for the same thing and the same roles in the same companies, right? couple best practices I've gotten throughout my career. Gordon asked quickly, when should I ask for the referral? How to make it natural? The when is tough. Sometimes it's on the first call. There's an open role. You guys hit it off. Sometimes it may take many months because maybe there's not an open role, or maybe it takes longer to build that relationship. But how to make it more natural, like I kind of mentioned, they sometimes offer the employee if it's a great conversation. But you could always say, like, hey, I'm really interested in this role. I think that's a great role fit. I think the company is a great cultural fit. What would you recommend? What would be best practices from here to get this job? Or what would be the best course of action from here to get this job? So something like that, where you're not saying, hey, can you refer me? But when you kind of phrase it that way, they know what you're asking. And oftentimes they'll say, if it's a no, it's kind of like, oh, just apply online, right? If it's a yes, they'll be like, well, send me your resume and I'll refer you through our internal system. So hopefully that answers your question, Gordon. That's a good question, though. Sure. Um, okay, so differentiation, LinkedIn is important for better or for worse. It is your professional brand online, and it's the first place recruiters go to get your first impression on you. So your headline should reflect the job you want, not just what you've done. This is big because recruiters use this tool called LinkedIn Recruiter Tool, and it pulls from people's headlines. So, for example, if you want to be a product manager, but your headline says project manager at Providence Health or something, you're really missing out on valuable searches. So, get a professional photo, get that headline, and also you can use keywords strategically. So recruiter searches also pull from your skills section, and you can include up to 50 skills. So make sure you fill out the skills section of your resume or of your LinkedIn page. And then in the summary section, this is where I'd mention your core values, your passion, your skills. Really, how do you synthesize that personal statement that Aleesha talked about that ties back to all the reflection that you did in part one? This is kind of what makes you unique. We have some questions about connection requests. I'm going to get to that too in a second. So tools, I think there's a lot of great tools available to make your job search more efficient. I personally love using Apollo.io. So if you haven't heard of it before, it's basically it's a sales prospecting tool, but they have a LinkedIn extension that verifies people's contact with like 90 to 95% accuracy. So it's really been a game changer for me and my clients to say, hey, how do I get someone's email and send them an email to reach their inbox? So this might answer the question in the chat, which is everyone basically uses LinkedIn DMs or LinkedIn friend requests, whatever it's called, connection requests. But I think you can stand out here by just reaching people where they're most likely to respond, which is email. So again, Apollo.io, I'll put that in the chat here. And it's specifically a LinkedIn extension. Calendly is another great tool for scheduling. It just removes friction from the process because people can book time directly with you. So again, increasing the number of calls. And then engaging your network strategically. If you're pivoting industries, I would say highlight certifications, courses that you plan to complete, shows kind of your commitment to get knowledge in that domain. But I think bigger picture here is a give to get approach. So look for ways to really provide value to your network, not just ask for favors or ask for a job. So for example, if you're okay with, to the extent that you're okay with posting on LinkedIn, stand out by creating content, create blog posts, thoughtfully engage with posts on LinkedIn. And this shows thought leadership that will attract recruiters and potential employers to you. But again, if it's just like one-to-one with someone on a call, a couple good strategies here. One would be a connector, right? So is your contact looking to hire someone, or maybe their colleague wants to hire someone into the company? For example, I got my job 2 companies ago because I connected my future boss to his colleague who was looking for a product marketer, and I connected them with my product marketer friend. And they didn't forget that when I went into the interview. The other thing would be uh, flattery, for lack of a better word. So recognize your contacts for really good work that they've done, promotion, product launch, etc. This could be done publicly or on the call. And then is there any like relevant insights or industry trends you could share that might help them in their job, in their role, in their company? That's also a way to stand out. So just wanted to kind of reframe the networking around instead of taking, but giving, and how you add value to people, I think can really shift things in your favor. The other thing to consider is a value add project. So this is a deliverable, a pitch deck, a blog post, a 30, 60, 90 plan. It can take a lot of forms, but the goal is to create some piece of content that you can share with the employer to stand out and really just show initiative, show that you're going above and beyond, and show knowledge of the company. So I will take you through some examples. Any questions before I moved on here, though? I think there might have been something in the chat.
Yeah, Andrew, there was one that came in on like sometimes email has lower response rates. So kind of similar issue. And like sometimes LinkedIn's hard to connect with people, but also sometimes email sees lower
For
response.
sure. I don't think, I mean, email is a panacea, and I didn't want to give that impression. Both are going to have relatively low response rates. And that's why I'd opt for, again, if you are trying to increase your network through cold outreach, make sure you're increasing the amount of people you are reaching out to, because it will lead to more connections, more conversations, and better relationships over time. It just seemed for me, email, reaching people in their professional email leads to higher response rates. That's just anecdotal, though.
The other thing I'll just add, something that you mentioned, Andrew, is like if there is someone you want to connect with, like see what else they're posting on LinkedIn. See if there are other ways to engage with them. Like, are they doing events? Have they just posted on a comment? Like, find ways maybe beyond the traditional like one-to-one outreach to start to, so they'll recognize your name, and so that when you do email them, it's not some like they've never heard your name.
Absolutely. And Anastasia had a good question. Do you put an MBA in your title if you haven't completed it yet? I had this question too when I was getting my MBA, and I think what the career office told us was just put MBA candidate and then your graduation date. And I think that's what everybody did. Okay, of course. So just here are some examples to share. I mean, on the left, there you can build like a project proposal for the recruiter or the hiring teams that just has a few lines of your experience, some example projects that you can deliver from day one. This will help you stand out. Or you can create your own 30, 60, 90 plan to show hiring teams it's like, hey, I have a plan to hit the ground running on day one. I mean, these can be time consuming, so don't go overboard with them. But some good times to use value projects would be, if maybe a hiring manager or a recruiter has ghosted you, share this to increase your chances of landing the interview. So that'd be the first use case. The second would be if you're in the interview process and you're on calls with employees there, reference this on the interview. Be like, oh, I've actually thought about this problem that your team is facing. Let me show you how I've actually addressed it in this project that I put together, this case study that I put together. Okay. So before we move on, I think RuPaul had a question. Do you recommend any format for the LinkedIn headline? Not necessarily. Aleesha, do you?
No, I would say like maybe a helpful something I've done is like if it's a role that I'm aspiring to, like see what other people are, maybe like try and like role model. So maybe looking someone who's already in the role to gain inspiration. I would keep it like short, but I know Andrew, what you said is it does pull into like the search that recruiters use. So like thinking about keywords, I think is probably what's most important versus like aesthetically or like how it sounds. So thinking about like keywords is probably what's most relevant.
Absolutely. So we've clarified goals, we've crafted a story, and now, we talked about differentiation as well. The last piece is really preparing for the interview. So we can dive into that. So Aleesha talked about the research. The research is actually really crucial, and it is a way to differentiate from others as well. So most people just kind of look at the company website, maybe look at some annual reports or earnings calls if they're a public company. But if it's a private company, look for executive interviews, podcast keynotes, Medium blogs, Twitter or X. Most startup founders love to create content because it's going to generate awareness for their startup. So I think if you can come into interviews deeply understanding the company, its values, as Aleesha mentioned, the market it operates in, customer base, and prepare thoughtful questions based on that research, you can really stand out. The interview itself, so this goes without saying, but come in with a lot of energy. People love positive people. I'd recommend a story bank of 10 or more stories that you know really well and get specific. So I actually hear a lot from recruiters and hiring managers that the biggest thing that trips up interviewees is a lack of specificity in their answers. They speak in, I mean, we're all guilty of this. You speak in generalities, or maybe we use good framework or the logic is there. But when people probe, maybe you're not getting as specific. So that leaves the interviewer with the impression that maybe you can't do that specific job, right? So really be prepared when you do these stories for relevant examples, relevant outcomes. Try to quantify your outcomes as best you can as well. The best interviewers ask a ton of probing questions. So if you structure your answers in a STAR method, which is situation, task, action, result, we can put that in the chat if you haven't heard of it. It'll really help you prepare. And then the elevator pitch, practice that like I have for years until it feels natural, because it is your first opportunity to make an impression, both on your networking calls, which that can be a little shorter, say like a 30 to 45-second intro, or an interview where they walk you through your resume. That'll be longer, say 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And then post interview, follow up with a thank you note, mention an insight or a commonality you discussed. I think that does help you stand out and shows you were engaged. And then I guess this might be common knowledge at this point, but whatever your preferred source of AI tool is, from ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, it can really supercharge your interview prep. There's a ton of use cases here. If anyone has some additional ones that's worked for them, put it in the chat. But I find it's really helpful to copy a job description to retrieve the top skills for that role, and then update my resume or my cover letter to weave those keywords in there. So you are possibly getting through the applicant tracking system and you're showing that your skills and stories are transferable. And I also use it to research my interviewer. So if you go to LinkedIn, and you can actually download their LinkedIn page and ask ChatGPT for like 3 career highlights or 5 questions for this interviewer. A couple other resources for using AI in your job search. First, there's Jeremy Schiffling from the Job Insiders. He's a really nice guy, former LinkedIn employee, now career coach, and he specializes in using AI for job searches. Austin Belchak as well from Cultivated Culture. He's an expert in kind of more unconventional job search strategies and using AI tools in your job search as well. Both have a ton of free resources, some paid, but I encourage you to check them out if you haven't done so already. Any questions or comments in the chat about the interview prep section? Okay. So before we get to Q&A, that'll be we'll just shout out our Leland pages here. If you want to dive into any of the strategies we talked about today, or if you want additional support, I do one-to-one coaching, both hourly and more of a comprehensive package. The QR code will link to more information. But I think this, the code is on there. So you'll get 15% off both the hourly and the package, and the discount code is listed on the page.
Yeah, similar to Andrew, Thanks, all. Happy to support you on your career journey. So feel free to reach out via Leland. Also offer one-on-one coaching, but also have like specific packages, and happy to engage in custom offerings as well. And there's the same discount code with my own customized code there. Hope this was really helpful. And we have a few minutes still for Q&A, so happy to take any, we're here, so happy to answer any questions or chat through anything that's top of mind.
Hey, Aleesha, I think we have a question here.
Yeah.
If I have no related experience, but some internship experience as a new grad, how would you go about landing an interview? I think at that point, it's even more of an onus um, on networking and developing that relationships and nurturing those relationships over time. As you're doing that, you're also going to parallel process getting the relevant certifications in the coursework, going to industry events, meeting people in person, getting that domain expertise, and getting the right skills and certifications to prove to the hiring teams that you can do that job. So you can't just fall back on resume experience at that point, but what you can do is get different alternative experience via certifications, coursework, events, some kind, maybe pro bono work, things like that to develop your skill set. I don't know, Aleesha, do you have any other thoughts to that?
Yeah, the other thing I'll add, I think those were great tips, Andrew, is I wouldn't discount the internship experience and also the experience you've had going through the graduation, right? And so sometimes it's you may not have the exact like work experience, but it's demonstrating that you have the competencies or the eagerness and the ability to learn. And so hiring managers recognize like what you're coming in with. And so I think it's targeting the appropriate sort of level of role, and then showing how, whether you've had related experiences, or showing how you may be able to build those skills really quickly on the job. But yeah, couldn't say like plus one to the networking and building relationships, and then tapping into the alumni network of the school that you went to. I think that could also be huge for reaching out to people who've been in your shoes. Could be a helpful tip. So we have another question on how long does it take to build a project plan or the 30, 60, 90-day plan for company? When do you get it sent to the hiring manager? Andrew, do you want to take that one?
Yes. So frankly, I think ChatGPT or an AI tool is a great resource for this. Just make sure that you can tailor tailor it according to the role. Like the more specificity you can get in the prompt, the better. So you can say the role is X, the company is Y, the level is Z. Give it as much information as possible so it can actually recommend the right directionally the right 30, 60, 90 plan. And then you have to go in with a keen eye and edit it even further to make sure it's relevant. But I think just for idea generation, ChatGPT is a good starting point. And then the second part was when would you send it to the hiring manager? Like I said, I think there's two different scenarios. You can send it to alongside that email, being like, by the way, I think this role's a great fit. I've gone ahead and put a 30, 60, 90 together. Let me know your thoughts. So as you do the outreach, put the attachment, the 30, 60, 90 plan there for them to see it. It may work out, it may not. So I think that would be the first use case to increase your odds of landing the interview. The second use case, like I said earlier, was when you're already in the interview process, reference it on your interview. But actually, yeah, I've thought about that, and I plan to address it in my second month on the job. Let me show you in my 30, 60, 90. And that shows a lot of maturity, mastery in the role that I don't think a lot of job seekers are doing today. Cool.
Another question on referrals. Most people don't even accept the connection request. By the time they accept it, the position gets filled. How can we do it effectively? I can share a little bit and then Andrew, feel free to chime in. I think kind of emphasizing the first thing that Andrew started with is like building the network and relationship. So if we're just sort of connecting randomly with people, I hear you and it's hard, and sometimes people are not going to respond. So how can you start as early as possible? And I think, trying to find like common connections often like helps like expedite the process. So if you know someone who can connect you to someone who's like closer to the hiring manager, that can also help drive maybe like faster responses. I think personalizing the connection request, even if it's like a quick message, I think Anastasia got that up above, tends to see. I know I read all like invitations that come in, and those that are personalized, I will spend more time on before I accept it. And think about even if there's like something valuable you can add. Yeah, those would be like my just sort of reiterating some of what we shared earlier. Anything else, Andrew, that you would add?
Yeah, I'll just echo your point about the analogy I use for networking is farming versus hunting.
Mm,
So hunting involves like seeking out immediate opportunities, applying for open roles, which everyone does, me included. But the downside is that those opportunities come and go quickly, and it doesn't leave you much time to build meaningful connections. So I think you can do both. You'll farm, you'll nurture long-term connections so those people know you when jobs open up and they can refer you and advocate on your behalf, more importantly. But then there's going to be some hunting involved. Some jobs will um, close quickly if it's popular. It's just kind of the unfortunate reality. Others won't, and you'll get that referral and you'll get in the interview queue. So I would just try to do both types of networking, and but I would recommend farming as a best practice over time.
agree. I like that analogy. All right, last couple of questions. Should I network with HR and the recruiter? I normally network with people who are in the same role, not the recruiter. Any
That's a good
specific?
question. I would recommend not reaching out to the recruiter because they get inundated with requests. Usually they're if they reach out to you, it's different, but they're not going to be as reactive to people reaching out to them. So yeah, I would work through the hiring teams and the hiring manager, and then they'll get in touch with the recruiter to get you into the interview process. So I agree with the question. I think it's the latter.
Yeah, plus one to that. I think also if you're able to get closer to the hiring manager, they're going to have more insight into the role expectations, the interview process. They might be able to refer you. Sometimes, depending, each company has their own policy. Sometimes recruiters can't actually refer folks, even if it's not like roles that they're covering. So, yeah, plus one to that. Is LinkedIn Premium worth it?
No one that
I'm
do you want to
partial
work at
because
LinkedIn here? I don't want to get in trouble.
I'm partial. I've used LinkedIn Premium. I do think it has its values, but I don't think it's like necessary. So if it's like a cost thing, I don't think it should be like a hindrance. And yeah, I think there's added value. It's something you can also just like sign up for like for certain phases of your job search, and you don't have to have it after that. Will you be sharing the recording? Yes, Rohit, I believe Amanda will be sharing the recording a couple of days after, and it will be available. Amanda, correct us, but I think it's for a week after the session. Awesome. Well, I know we're at time, so just want to thank you all for the great engagement. Hopefully this was helpful, and thank you, Andrew, for partnering with me on this.
Likewise, thank you all for attending, and I'll put some outro music in here. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.